I thought I'd put a mountain. My sacred mountain.
Oh, Sam,
Made from Toblerone chocolates.
Yes, exactly. That's it.
Tommy, where is your university? Is based in Toronto?
I'm a professor at Laurentian University, which is in Sudbury. It's 450 kilometers north of Toronto.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
6 hours from Toronto.
So we need to have Nader and Reza Purvaziri. Nasrin, what about the images from your side? How many images you sent to Julio?
Before or after talking to Nader? Before talking to Nader, I had sent something like about 14 images. Yes. And then I sent 3 images.
Yeah.
3 plus 1. 1 when I'm introducing myself and 3 when I am talking, if I do talk.
And Nader considered the images and sent an email to me and suggested about the second theme of the two-way webinar. You know, I think it will be done after this professional webinar today. We will decide about the next programs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Julio, let's have from your side. Let's have some things in regards to the theme of the 2 days webinar.
What do you mean? Do you want to see the slideshow? I mean,
no, let's talk. Let's have.
By the way, you need to enable the screen sharing. Please do that. Yeah. SAP.
We better do it right now because otherwise we would have that technical glitch with the public being there. Yeah. Ahmed, okay, I think the screen sharing needs to be enabled.
Yeah. Wait, Nader. Nader is trying to get in, and he says that somebody needs to allow him in. Ahmad, you need to let Nader in. He's waiting.
Nader is waiting. Nader is
Ahmad, can you hear me?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, please.
Okay, now you're getting in. You're getting in.
He's here. Yeah.
I will see your name, so you're coming in. It may take us a few minutes, a few seconds. Wait. Don't cut off until you're in.
He's here. We can see his name here.
Yeah, but okay. But he doesn't see it yet. Okay, so the screen sharing is going on now.
I see.
Are you in? Okay, bye. Okay, everybody see the screen sharing, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we are good there. I'm going to stop sharing. So we are good.
Good morning, dear everyone. Sorry for not being able to get in.
Good morning, Nader.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
May I make one short request? We have about 2 minutes. Can we take 30 seconds for one silent minute of meditation? Okay, starts now. Great. Hello, Merdad. Hello, Anna.
Hello.
Look at your beautiful face and that wonderful mountain behind you.
The Matterhorn, yes. I don't have a nice bookshelf behind me, so I put a mountain.
Look Okay, that's
We
beautiful.
all have amazing libraries and bookshelves.
It
And
looks as though we're going to get on quick. Everybody is feeling well?
yes, great.
Dear Nasreen,
I am feeling
we've been
fine.
in
Thank
contact with
you.
each other. Thank you for your
Yes,
beautiful contribution.
no problem. It's a pleasure.
Reza, nice to see you. Merdod,
Nice to see you.
Sam, you have your mute. Your mute.
Now I'm on mute.
Mute. And anyway, and Ahmad, dear Ahmad, all of this is because of you. How are you?
We're going live in a minute. I recommend everybody that doesn't speak to have their to be mute, so there is no interference. When you speak, of course, you unmute.
اتوماتیک شروع میشه. شروع کنیم.
And then if you guys,
الان شروع میشه.
Oh, look at Nasreen. You're somewhere in snow.
I have to justify my scarf.
بریم شروع. Welcome everyone to the two-way webinar with the team of a research for transcendent built environments. I am pleased to have you, Tom, Nader, Julio, Roberto, Nasreen, Anna, Tommy, Meghdad, Sam, and Reza as the professionals in this webinar and appreciate your presence. To begin with, I try to present very briefly what are the thoughts and ideas of 2A that lead to today's webinar, and beside ACSF created this importance. Two-A magazine. 2A Architecture and Art magazine has been involved with the various activities and organization throughout the past 16 years. Each and every one of these activities were meant to improve the quality of lives for all the humanity. The 3 issues of 2A magazine have been published in a professional association with Architecture, Culture, Spirituality Forum in 2008, 2011, and 2020. In order to be more effective and efficient, 2A Academy of Innovative Ideas in Architecture brings all the 2A's activities under one umbrella. 2A Continental Architectural Awards. 2A CAA is that series of architecture awards that have been designed to recognize the significant architectural and urban design contribution of various organizations and individuals worldwide. The award preserves the essence of uniqueness among the continents. So far, 6 times have been held annually. 2A City Architecture Movie Award is another activity of 2A which reflects integrating social architectural expertise and also the fusion of architecture and cinema depicts how these 2 art forms intervene in a subtle way. 2A Archipedia is another activity of 2A Academy about a network of professional architects of different origins. Based on the rules and conditions, candidate whom has a special consideration for society's social, cultural, spiritual, environmental, and other humanistic needs. Paragon City Urban Interaction Forum. In this activity, prominent list of Paragon cities will be provided. Its message is creating a better living space in cities around the globe. There are design parameters based on desired approaches, strategies, and qualities. 2A Institute of Architecture and Design is another activity of 2A Academy and will act as an educational tool by using its extensive professional sources and knowledge, by sharing them with its correspondents, which would be beneficial in their respective field of activity. 2A Art Gallery presentation of creativity and innovation is another activity of 2A Academy, based on inviting, promoting, and presenting artists and their artworks in 2A magazine since 2006. 2A has created a virtual space at the website so the artists can freely interact, share ideas, and present their artworks at 2A virtual gallery. All these activities are collectively designed to expand the professional vision for creating a more suitable architectural space in urban environment. Now, I would like to invite Nader Ardalan to continue as the webinar moderator. Mr. Ardalan is president of Ardalan Associates Architecture and Planning. He has been visiting professor at Harvard, Yale, MIT, and Tehran University, founding member steering committee of Aga Khan Award for Architecture. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ahmad, and thank you for organizing this webinar. Welcome. It's great pleasure that we're able to speak with a very larger audience today. And I want to just quickly say, we began this work about architecture, culture, spirituality about 12 or so years ago. And I will obviously have Tom Berry, who will be speaking about this subject. But I'd like to go, Julio, to the first slide, please.
Let me share the screen first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Let's go to the next slide. The next one. Yes. Wonderful. Now, when someone uses the term transcendent, as we have in a search for transcendent built environments, we should ask, what is being transcended? Let's go back quickly in history. Leon Battista Alberti in the 15th century, paraphrasing Protagoras, wrote, "Man is the measure of things. With the physical sense, man measures perceptible things. With the intellect, he measures intelligible things." And this is the important line. And he attains onto supra-intelligent, beyond the intelligible things, transcendently. Our own wonderful Iranian contemporary, now deceased, but modern poet, Nimo Yosuch, said in a beautiful poem, "Were thoughts to fly, Bestow wings upon your thoughts. Fear not, should they transcend the limits of your preconceptions. So today we're going to be dealing with our preconceptions of this contemporary world to try to see how it can enable us to deal with the business of transcendent built environments. Next, consciousness. I'll go through this very quickly. Consciousness, or at least proto-consciousness, is theorized by a very modern, highly noted physicist to be a fundamental property of the universe, present even at the first moment of the universe during the Big Bang. It can't be destroyed. It just dissipates and distributes itself into the universe at large. So says Dr. Robert Lanza in his wonderful book and series. This is very much a part of the traditional Iranian view. Consciousness predates existence. It is in the universe. It is in the atmosphere. Next, please. Now about city, because we're talking about built environments. And today we're going to be really dealing with urban environments. We're really going to be dealing with at the scale of neighborhoods and communities. But when you look at the concept of city, Jacques Ellul, a 20th century philosopher and theorist, wrote, "The city symbolizes the supreme work of man, and as such, represents man's ultimate rejection of God." So wrote this sociologist. What did he mean? He wrote it in the book called The Meaning of the City. In this work, he really deals with the fact that theologically, in most of the Abrahamic religions, man was placed originally in paradise, in the Garden of Eden. But this place, he refused to stay, and he fell from grace into the earth, into the world. But he created other gatherings with other people, and therefore, in order to survive on this earth, he didn't exist in harmony with nature. He developed the idea of technique to overcome nature. This is the primary dilemma of the 20th century, as writes Jacques Ellul, and we'll be talking about how to overcome the limitations and degradation of this earth because of this idea. I just want to refer, however, in the original Islamic view, man was not a dominator of nature. Man was to be the vicegerent, the caretaker of nature. Keep this in your mind as we go through this series. So I want to really now introduce Tom Berry, president, chairman of Architecture, Culture, Spirituality, and he'll introduce what is the mission and how we came into being to form this community around 600 people around the world. Tom, would you take over?
Yes, thank you, Nader. So the Architecture, Culture, and Spirituality Forum, for those of you who don't know about us, is an international organization that supports research, practice, education, and advocacy on the significance, experience, and meaning of the built environment. It's the only organization of its type that addresses the spiritual and cultural aspects of the built environment. We believe that the design and experience of the built environment can assist in the spiritual development of humanity in service of addressing the world's most pressing issues. ACSF was founded in 2007 by a small group of American professors of architecture. Today, it is a multi-faith, global community of scholars, educators, and practitioners representing 56 countries. Its scholarly activities focus on the capacity of the built environment to bridge cultural and religious differences, raise human consciousness, access lost knowledge, educate people, address environmental and cultural sustainability, advance social justice, and improve health and well-being. ACSF hosts annual symposia at places with spiritual significance, publishes member research, maintains a website as an open source scholarly archive, and produces a bi-monthly newsletter. We also support scholars, practitioners, and students through annual awards and scholarships. If you are not a member, please visit our website and join. As a member, you will gain access to ACSF programs and receive the newsletter, which includes news and opportunities from around the world. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Tom. We'd like to now go and present the ACSF Declaration of Transcendent Human Habitat. I'll give a bit of background on methodology and process. We began this work essentially about 5 years ago after the 2015 symposia held at Harvard University. Many of us got together and said, let's try to identify background criteria for the topic of transcendent architecture, and then it grew into the idea of human habitat. We did a search of all existing manifestos, declarations from the time of Vitruvius up to Siam and the more recent activity to find the background of this in literary history. We archived these documents, compared them, interpreted them, synthesized them. We had developed basic criteria and statements that were peer-reviewed, and finally a final document draft. These were also submitted to workshops, to surveys, to analysis, and development of case studies. So what you see is a one page, which has voluminous backgrounds to it, but the challenge was in one page, could you reduce the essence of what you have to say? Now, I'm going to ask my colleagues who took part with me in this research, and I'm going to quickly introduce them to talk about. I'll say that this begins with Tammy Gabbert, who is professor at Laurentian University in Ontario, Roberto Ciotti, who's a practicing architect and founder of Larkin Architects in Toronto. I myself have been introduced already by Ahmad, and to Julio Bermudez, who's the president of ACS and who's a professor at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. So without any further ado, Tammy, would you begin with the preamble?
Thank you, Nader. ACSF holds that the design and experience of the built environment can assist the spiritual development of humanity in addressing the unprecedented challenges facing all planetary existence today. Challenges including climate change, environmental degradation, increasing economic inequality, large migratory pressures and social struggles, the erosion of liberal democracy, and the exponential development of disruptive technologies.
Roberto, would you do the worldview for us?
Thank you, Nader. We advocate that architecture, landscape architecture, planning, and the related design and creative fields have substantive roles to play in directly addressing these challenges by nurturing new personal and collective orientations of human consciousness, purpose, and conduct grounded on a transcendental, reverential perspective. We profess a worldview that our tangible and intangible universe has a spiritual dimension, and that this ineffable realm is central to pursuing, finding, appreciating, and supporting life's meanings. The spiritual dimension is conceived as an order in the universe that is transcendent in terms of being beyond ourselves at all levels, and posited to be the ultimate source from which all beings rise, depend on, and return to.
Julio, will you do the principles kindly?
Thank you, Nader. Since dwelling is how worldviews are inevitably expressed in everyday life, human habitats are proposed to be one of the most effective methods to take concrete steps toward the spiritual development of humanity. We recognize the three principles of contemplation, compassion, and moderation as the perennial and complementary core values and intentions common to the spiritual practice of many world traditions. These three principles can serve as pillars to cultivate human spirituality in the process of envisioning, planning, designing, and realizing the built environment, increasingly supported by science for their benefits in individual and collective health, growth, and well-being. We understand these practice-based principles universally in this way. We understand contemplation or meditation or prayer as being or communicating with the transcendent order of the universe and providing the widest and deepest of all perspectives. A contemplative principle aligns our inner private self with the transcendent through high levels of consciousness of and reverential adaptation to the existing cultural, social, living, and environmental conditions. This conscious and deeply spiritual dialogical principle establishes the possibility of belonging, connectedness, security and safety, peace, meaningfulness, and thus unity. We understand compassion or mercy or charity as cultivating empathy, love, and care for others by offering our time, effort, and possessions to those in need. The principle of compassion cultivates spirituality by serving, giving, or connecting with other living beings. The expression of justice and equity best summarize its pursuits if they create conditions of reconciliation, hospitality, generosity, fairness, patience, loving kindness, honesty, and receptivity towards others. We understand moderation or frugality or fasting as invoking voluntary self-restraint for the sake of developing humility, authenticity, discipline, clarity of purpose, respect, and appreciation of what is. The principle of moderation resensitizes us with the phenomenal world by reducing, simplifying, and or abstaining from anything that doesn't serve our spiritual development. This translates in the frugal utilization of the earth's resources and human products in light of the contemplative and compassion principles.
Thank you very much, Julio, for that presentation. A comment on what you have been watching and seeing. These are aspects of how to self-prepare yourself to be in a state, to be able to think, to be able to feel, to be able to act within a transcendent manner. Not all of these you have to practice. These are the stepping stones that we have observed from all the people that we have researched, leading architects, theoreticians, in the idea that there is a self-preparationness, that today in most architectural fields, developers and governments, these considerations that you have heard are not being necessarily considered. Within this path, we also looked at a more detailed, but still very generic level of criteria. These are general, I would say, ideas to keep in your mind as you prepare yourself for dealing with building transcendent environments, particularly related to urban design of communities. Could we go on to the next? We propose the following 6 interconnected and interdependent criteria: cultural consciousness, justice, participation, environmental adaptation, and eco-technology, an essential principle, simplicity. We propose that for effectively engaging and steering public policy, development practice, urban planning, architectural design, and their implementation towards spiritually inspired and nurturing built environments at scales ranging from the dwelling to the cluster, neighborhood, community, city, and the region as a whole. We'll now illustrate a few of these 6 aspects through case studies that have been done. Cultural consciousness inspires an integral respect for the diversity of cultural heritages around the world and generates a spiritual sense of identity and belonging. Here we're looking at the Wudang Mountain Heritage Site in China, which has really been there in existence for centuries as a community. Next. Justice ensures ethical and legal means by which equity and spiritual freedom can be achieved. We're looking at, in New York, Manhattan, at the High Line Park, very contemporary. People got together, took a raised cargo distribution rail system that was not being used in contemporary times, and turned it into a park, a green park, a place where people could walk, be in contact with nature, in the highest of densities of urban developments. The idea was keep it simple, keep it quiet, keep it wild, and develop it slowly. Go ahead. Next. Participation empowers personal and communal engagement for democratic and inclusive decision-making regarding built environments. It's very important. We're dealing today with most master plans and city planning, which is top down. And the people whom it impacts have very little participation and little of their needs and their desires We're looking here at the example of Serenbe community in Georgia, in the United States, that one of our fellow architecture, culture, spirituality, former board members developed as a master plan in 2004, and is existing live. People got together, they chose land, they developed a program for this land in a community, mutual participation manner, and then went ahead to build individual projects within a general agreed principle of sustainable design. Here you're looking at a solar energy oriented private home of one of our former board members, Philip Tabb. Next, please. Now, environmental adaptation has been a word that's been around now for some time. And so we tend to take it for granted. But it is the essential aspect of human relationship to nature. Environmental adaptation fosters human habitats to be realized in spiritual and material harmony with nature, with the cosmos, and as Buckminster Fuller has always said to us, and the energy income of the earth from the sun. You're looking at Pueblo Bonito in New Mexico, a work really of around 1,000+ years ago, of how people came together, built their own community in a sustainable and highly spiritual oriented manner. Next, please. Ecotechnology cultivates the innovative integration and realization of sustainable urban systems of goods and services within healthy ecosystems and flows. We're looking at Vauban community in southern Germany, in Freiburg. People got together, went to take an abandoned lot in 1990, worked together to develop the program, and a community developed of 5,000 people, which is almost car-free. It's really oriented to children, to pedestrians, and at the same time, as you see on the right-hand side, adapting to the highest level of solar energy development so that they could be essentially zero energy in their life patterns in this community. Next, please. We end with the idea of essential simplicity. Essential simplicity nurtures a moral and aesthetic economy of means to achieve a spiritual vitality and a great beauty in architecture and the built environment. Here we recognize the wonderful creation of Hassan Fatih, the Egyptian architect who wrote Architecture for the Poor. This is a work, Dar al-Islam in Abiquiu in New Mexico in 1982, that we offer as one of the examples of building a community of people that adapts to nature and follows almost all of the basic principles that we have now shown. So I now like to go on and ask Julio if he would tell you something about our next steps in this process of research.
Thank you, Nader. What has been presented so far deals with the habitat or large scale of our built environment. We recognize that we also need to address architectural scale. This is where we see our work going next. And this is, we're gonna show now the study of what we call transcendent architecture. Well, this work is just starting. We already recognize at least 3 ways in which architecture could become transcendent. One, by inviting aesthetic and ontological responses. This is by engaging people symbolically, ritualistically, or experientially, something related to the principle of contemplation. 2, by advancing ethical and compassionate causes. This means supporting services, practices, and realization that address human dignity, health and well-being, all life, ecology, etc. And 3, by engaging in practices or results that go well beyond cultural, social, or professional conventions, addressing the practice of moderation. We will quickly share 4 examples of transcendent architecture. Our plan is to begin a systematic study of such buildings to discover the underlying design and other characteristics that make such remarkable work successful. The Friday Mosque of Isfahan. The ineffability of this place may be explained by its incredible materiality and associated geometry. Its luminous program, of course, sacred space, but also in how ritual, scale, space, and form are masterfully articulated in a total, breathtaking whole. Louis Kahn's famous Salk Institute in La Jolla, California, is another example of transcendent architecture. Its relationship to its immediate context, nature, but also the ultimate context, the cosmos, invite profound contemplative experiences. The use of simple forms, rhythm, proportions, and light create a unique environment full of hidden and manifest moments of realization. Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava responds to New York's transformation of the 9/11 Plaza, commonly referred to the Oculus, is a third example. From its symbolic nature to its sense of unity to the massive scale that is inviting yet overwhelming, this work is full of beauty, motion, ritual, and splendid material light. Last but not least is the bathhouse of Peter Sumter in Switzerland. This building proves, along the previous 2 examples, that we can find transcendent architecture while responding to the seemingly mundane needs. Few contemporary buildings manage to turn on every single sense of our humanity at the same time. The result is extraordinarily powerful.
While this slide goes through its beautiful transformation, we want you to know that we're working diligently, and we hope that you'll participate with us, because on this next step, we'd like to develop a manifesto for transcendent architecture and the inclusion of those who are listening, and of course, those of us who've been working and those who have now participated as respondents. We hope that they work and think about how to develop a manifesto for transcendent architecture with us. So now we've concluded that presentation, and we'd like to essentially ask the respondents, who are Sam Tehranchi, Mehrdad Sharif, Anna Gristing, Reza Pourvaziri, and Nasrin Seraji, to take a few minutes and present themselves before we go into the second part of this presentation. Sam, will you begin?
Thank you for your introduction and also this wonderful webinar. And my name is Sam Tehranchi. I've been in architectural field for more than 20 years. My interest and most works have been on large-scale projects, which are mostly public buildings and have close relations to public and the city. So it's my very interest to see how this kind of architecture that we are talking about right now can put itself to this large-scale developments, and how it can influence the public and people who are visiting them and using them. Thank you very much.
Mehrdad? would you take over and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Nader. Hello, everybody. I'm Mehrdad Sharif, founder of Mesh Architects and director of Banamid Architecture Research Institute. During the last 10 years of my practice, I have mainly focused on principles of quality of the spaces and atmosphere. And in our actual practice, our intention has been to reflect such values in our office projects. And also, our research group in Banamid Institute is working on development of the atmosphere-based design process models to bring about a fresh perspective on design process. And now it's an honor to be here among 2A Magazine, ASCF forum and participant and audience, and hope to have a good online webinar.
Next, we'd like to ask Anna if she'd be kind enough to speak about her work and her background. Anna, would you present yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Nader, and thank you very much to you all for the invitation to participate in this very interesting initiative and a webinar. So I'm an architect and urbanist, and I've been teaching for many years in Qatar, so in the Gulf region, in the Middle East. And in particular, in these regions, I've been working on what I call blue urbanism, working with water and also looking at food, water, energy nexus. Also looking at public art, public space, the importance of public spaces, and also really looking at the symbiosis between architecture and landscape architecture and nature. And my personal research is also on borders. So I've worked on the Cyprus buffer zone and also the Korean demilitarized zone. So it's really this idea of building spaces for peace. And there, I think it's very important also really these aspects you're talking about, the transcendent, the spiritual, the communities. So how do we bring these qualities also into these spaces that we're trying to envision with obviously the communities to create spaces of peace in zones of conflict. So I'm currently living in Geneva, Switzerland. This is my home, and I'm affiliated with the University of Vermont, the Institute of Environmental Security and Diplomacy, which is where I do my work on peace parks and environmental peace building. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Rezo, we've been working together for now a number of years. You're now in Canada. Would you kindly present yourself and something about what you're doing?
Thank you so much, Nader. My name is Rezo Pourvazri, architect and urban researcher and also urban activist, now working in Canada. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for organizing this great webinar, and I really appreciate for this kind of interesting subject. I work for many years in the field of sustainable development as an urban researcher. We had lots of research around the world about concepts of sustainability. I worked with UN Habitat for 2 decades, and I designated by Under Secretary General of United Nations and Executive Director of UN Habitat as the first global advocate of UN Habitat, work in different area, work about new urban agenda, part of the team, and also I established City Prosperity Initiative for metropolitan cities here in Toronto, 2015. Also, I work as a chair of Urban Economy Forum, kind of joint partnership between UN Habitat and Government of Canada. Recently, I'm working to establish World Urban Pavilion as a kind of global hub for urban SDGs in Toronto, based on kind of memorandum of understanding between Government of Canada and United Nations. Really hope to have a great and wonderful session today and participate. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Reza. And last but not least, from the other side of where we are in this world, it's a great pleasure to ask Nasreen, Professor Nasreen Siraji, if you would present yourself. Nasreen.
Myself. Thank you very much, Nader. Thank you very much, all of the team of the organization, and also Ahmed from Tehran, for inviting me to take part in this discussion group. How can I respond to this sort of introduction of myself? I am an architect. You can see it in my picture, perhaps. Half of my face is a drawn image, and the other half is perhaps no. It's fine, actually. The first image is enough. That's my sort of half face is fine. I was born in Iran, in Tehran. I studied medicine to begin with, and I went on to study architecture in the UK at the Architectural Association. I have been practicing my practices in France, and I have been teaching in Europe and America, and now in Asia, and very soon back to Europe again. I have mainly worked most of my practice life in social housing in Europe. I have produced a book on social housing, which is called Housing Substance of Our Cities, which basically is a cross-section of 100 years of social housing. What does interest me is to look at architecture as an integrative position that we have in the urban realm, but also in the city. However, I do think that it is very much time to transcend all sorts of practices of urbanism as well as the practice of architecture. I do think that modernism has had its turn, and we do need to re-look at the way that we practice architecture critically. It is quite important. It was quite important for me to close my office in 2018 in order to be able to think about new practices of architecture in a seriously critical way. As you see on that slide, it is. I am in a perpetual questioning mode. And when the image of the woman cannot be portrayed as a full image, then the capacity of architecture fulfills it with the image as a drawing. Thank you.
Wow, there you go. How could you get a better all-star team than these wonderful respondents? So we're now going to move on to part 2 of our webinar. And thank goodness we're doing well on the timing. So I'd like to ask each of the respondents to now really take about 5 minutes and look at and think about, and you've had a bit of time to maybe think about two questions that we raised and shared with you. The first one is, how has the legacy of such declarations, such manifestos as you have seen here today in history impacted the real world of planning and design? This is very important. What's the value of these declarations in our history? Have they really helped guide design? Or is this something for each individual group for their own pleasure that they have done? Obviously, some of us think that it has left a strong impression. It'd be wonderful to hear your thoughts on that. The second question is, what are the significant contributions and shortcomings of this particular declaration that we have presented for your consideration? And how can the ACSF declaration be enhanced to better serve, and this is important, in actual world practice and through public policy actions? So I now go in the same order, and I'd like to ask Sam Tehranchi if you would kindly respond to these two questions. Sam.
Thank you, Nader, for this good questions. Actually, what I'm going to say somehow is an answer which combines the two questions together, and then maybe I can explain a better answer to both of them. So I want to start with a saying from Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier has this thing that he said once, and I quote, that architecture is a starting point for anyone who wants to take humanity towards a better future. So in this one sentence, he's explaining two things: humanity and the better future. So it really is a matter of defining the better future, and it's a really defining how architecture can take us there. So I think these kind of manifestos, such manifestos that this group is working on, are really a path towards this. And all through the history, what we have witnessed in architecture, and good architecture actually, and the architecture which has influenced societies in a good way, has had the same qualities as what this group is searching for. So saying that, I should also point out that what the society or the world that we are witnessing today is suffering from lack of human values and also life qualities. This has been mostly caused by the focus on financial and economical issues, and also the need to somehow survive rather than to have the good quality of life. So maybe if we want to do some change, if we want to influence our society, we have to get into the real roots of what is causing the problems and what is taking away the self-consciousness and also the qualities of human values. This, of course, I think has also influenced architecture in being a pure space, in creating the pure space, the space which really somehow copes with human nature. So in some ways, this has to be clarified that we are facing a very chaotic community, a very chaotic society, and to deal with this, to somehow put this manifesto in place and encourage people to do that, we should see the reality of our work. this disappearance of human value, which we are witnessing right now, is one of its kind. Maybe we have come into a point of history with which all of this should change in a way. I go back to Isfahan architecture, and when Sheikh Baha'i introduced the concept of the Naqsh Jahan square to somehow unite the different powers which were at that time and also all through the history are in contradict to each other, like the religious, the religion, the economy, and also the power or the politics. So it brought all of them together with the idea, an architectural idea, a large-scale urban idea to unite the society. Also, when you look to the history, what modern movement has done with all its goods and bads. Also, they have introduced a kind of living, a kind of path for the modern human beings, for the modern man. So by looking to them, we can find better ways to somehow highlight this manifesto. My idea is to make this a movement, how we can make this manifesto turn into a movement, so we have larger communities interested in following this, how to make it more interesting, how to bring motivations for this to happen. So these ideas can really help how to somehow give more power to the manifesto that we are talking about, and the kind of architecture that we think is deemed for the human society. I'd like to close my my talk with a definition of architecture by Rem Koolhaas. And I quote, he says, and I quote, architecture is a dangerous mixture of omnipotence and impotence. Incoherence and chance is what sustain the career of all architects. They are faced
Some would like now to conclude that portion of your presentation, and I'd like to go and see how Mehrdad is reacting to these two questions.
Thank you, dear Nader. Before I answer questions, please allow me to express my sincere admiration and gratitude for this brave move by the architecture, culture, and spiritual forum to support in a vacant point of view towards architecture. About question one, I think divinely inspired architectures often evolve over centuries and were the largest building in the world prior to recent massive buildings. This shows the significant influence of manifestos arising out of the world spiritual traditions in planning and design. However, as the world consciousness gradually turned towards a scientific, technologic, and materialistic view, the architecture took a turn towards reflecting this level of identity. Now is the time to heal the gap of separation by a conscious approach to the world, including architecture. In the modern era of design, we think in terms of form and content. Unfortunately, the limitation of this viewpoint does not relate fully to a wider and essential spectrum of architecture, such as the spiritual aspect of it. maybe fortunately, we can find practical answers in the work of great Persian thinker or great Persian thinkers such as Ghazali in Ihya al-Ulum book. In this book, he addresses the challenge of defining objective reality, and he introduced a method with 4 key identifiers in comparison to form and content. As you can see in this slide, he suggests 4 parameters instead of form and contents. He suggests form phase, meaning of form, inmost phase, and inmost meaning. When I extend and convert this matrix of identifiers to the architecture and design terms, I can call them form, function, atmosphere, and essence. According to this theory, any change in form requires a change in content, and any change in content requires a change in form. Therefore, in the real world of planning and design, of most divine architecture, we see both essence and atmosphere interconnected with form and function.
Wonderful. Mehrdad,
And
you have 2 slides.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to go to question 2. And about question 2, and about the contributions, mainly, architecture can be considered as the primary human creation seen all over the world, in my view. The 3 principles of contemplation, compassion, and moderation have the most significant contributions to the declaration. Recognition of these 3 principles at the core of architecture can function as a catalyst for transformation of human consciousness through the medium of largest, mostly available and used, man-made force upon the planet Earth. And about the shortcomings, allow me to humbly make 2 suggestions for maybe improvement of the declaration. I feel there is a need for a greater emphasis on the power of consciousness as the primordial reality of the manifested world, encompassing both nature and the built environment in the declaration. Aside from the factor of capacity to inspire in measurement for the success of declaration, I feel addition of another factor under the title active support of the strategies and designs for actual practice is vital. In response to the second part of question 2, I would like to suggest formation of a designated subdivision in the structure of ACSF organization under the title of active support of the strategies and design for projects eligible to receive such benefits from this forum. Thank you, Nader.
Thank you, Mehrdad, for that very, very fine 2 contributions, very deep. I'd like to ask if kindly we could now go on to Anna to respond to her thoughts to these questions.
Okay, thank you so much again, and congratulations also for this very important initiative. So for the first question, maybe I'd just like to reflect on the Athens Charter. And obviously this was a charter for, the functional city, the rational city, even maybe the hygienic city. And while it had obviously many positive results, we can also see that it also had some negative ones. But at the time, it was responding to disorder, slums, disease, and a certain necessity to have this sort of rational organization of the city. recently, actually, when I was at Harvard University, I remember listening to a presentation by Andrea Branzi from Florence, and he talked about a new Athens charter. So maybe I just want to mention a few of the ideas to reflect on this. And so it's his sort of reaction to the Athens Charter today. And he talks about the weak metropolis. So that's interesting, saying we're in a very different context. And these 10 points, I'll just read through them very quickly and then just stop on one of them. The city as a high-tech favela, the city as a personal computer every 20 square meters, the city as a place for a cosmic hospitality, which is the one that I will discuss later. The city as an air-conditioned full space, the city as a genetic laboratory, the city as a living plankton, research models of weak urbanization, the faded and crossable borders, reversible and light infrastructures, so more flexibility in the structures, and realize great transformations through micro projects. Also this idea that many small, combination of micro projects can also have an impact at a much larger scale. So the cosmic hospitality, which particularly interested me, is this idea of a new coexistence between humans and animals to move toward a less anthropocentric metropolis. And he developed a project with Stefano Boeri in 2008 for the Grand Paris. And there he talked about introducing more species into the city. And we can see actually, if we see the images of the pandemic, when everyone was in confinement, that actually there were in many cities of the world, these animals were coming into the cities. We also know that actually when we study urban biodiversity, which is an important part of my work, that it's often in the cities we have in some cases, for example, bees, much better biodiversity, because in the rural areas there's a lot of pesticides. So it's very interesting to see how this change, this division between the urban and the rural is being blurred. And I think it's very important that we talk not only about cities and urbanism, but really the rural as well, and this integration. So they took as a model, actually, the cosmic hospitality, the Indian metropolis, and they also mentioned the sacred cows that coexist in the city. And they also reference, actually, these silent towers, the parsis, which are in the city, where the dead bodies are exposed to the birds and then are sort of transformed in this way. So I think it's really bringing up this relationship that we have with the urban and rural, but also with animals and with life and death, and how that can be integrated into the city. So the Towers of Silence, this was actually the Zoroastrians that implemented these in India. So what he says as well is the city is nowadays no longer a hall of architectural boxes, but a territory of men, facilities, information, immaterial relations. The models of weak urbanization try to combine architecture and agriculture, technology and meteorology, goods and sacred cows. The only possible reform of the city has to be found within the interstitial spaces, in the home economies, in the human relationships, and within our minds. And here, I think the idea of the sacred cows and goods, and the idea that we can find it within our minds, I think actually brings back to this idea of talking about the transcendent and bringing back the spiritual into, or the importance of the spiritual and transcendence into architecture. So I wanted to make a reference for the first question with the Athens Charter. And that brings me then to the second question. And possibly because I'm talking about nature, this symbiosis between man and animals, and also urban and nature. So I think maybe one of the questions I would say is to really think about, we're talking about human habitats in this declaration, and should we also think about human habitats, but talking about habitats for all, also all living species, and really this integration. We saw also the pandemics have really brought forward these very complex relationships between animals, microorganisms, and humans, and how there's all these imbalances. So that we really have to see all of these as a whole. Also, when we look at the different scales that you mentioned, obviously the micro scales all the way to the regions, but then there's also the earth, and there I come to sort of to maybe these cultures and indigenous cultures who talk about the rights of earth jurisprudence, the Gaia, the Mother Earth, and these cosmogonies and these sort of indigenous cultures where really the nature, man, architecture, building, and all species are really interrelated. And I would say we might call these ecozoic cultures. I'm actually collaborating with People for Earth in Korea on a project for the DMZ, and they talk about this ecozoic culture and the earth jurisprudence. Yes, talking about really this symbiosis of building and nature, symbiotic systems. And you mentioned also the importance of the participation and the co-creation. So I think it's very important about enabling and empowering communities. You mentioned really the bottoms-up processes and policies and inclusivity. And I think especially women, I think we really need to highlight the role of women in architecture, in the city, and this inclusiveness, of course, of all all communities, of all races. But I think I would also highlight the role of women. And also, I'd like to talk about regeneration.
If I may ask you, dear Anna, and forgive my
yes.
my interruption, but we have to sort of move on to the next speaker. And I really value what you have said. Please keep those thoughts when we go into the next panel discussion and bring them up for discussion there, if you would be kind enough. Beautiful, beautiful contributions. So may I now invite Reza to answer and give his response to these questions?
Thank you so much, Nader. I remember in 2004, maybe, we had a meeting. I organized first kind of congress about urban design. And you present a Habitat Bill of Rights, interesting book that you provide with Krishna Doshi, George Condelus, Moshe Safdie, and present to the first conference of Habitat in Vancouver. I remember that, and you emphasized that, Reza, please try to translate that one. I didn't know about that document. When I start communication with Habitat, I understand there is a serious gap about understanding concept of architecture, and they didn't. Honestly, we have not anything specific about that in that period in the UN Habitat. After some years working as a kind of urban activist, I understand if we want to create something fundamental in the concept of sustainability, we need to create a dialogue. Dialogue is first step. And I believe, in response to the first question, this dialogue need to make and advocate in different channel and for different kind of media to have some impact in the process of our changing paradigm of urbanization. Attention to architecture and spiritual values in cities is a fundamental aspect. This is not materialistic focus, it's a spiritual focus on the quality of the space and quality of life. In general, contemporary urbanism has had a little focus on understanding spatial values and understanding its complex spiritual dimensions. This forgetfulness has created a habitat that has the same universal identity. We miss our local identity based on that kind of approach to urbanism. And every day we try to make kind of similar platform for urbanism, and the local identity is in danger of being destroyed. Global development agenda, as I emphasize about that, usually do not address this issue and give the many pressure just on housing. I'm telling in context of the urbanization. Try to focus on quantity rather than quality. The Sustainable Development Goals and New Urban Agenda both address this important issue in a very general way. I review New Urban Agenda in different sessions from the perspective of architecture and non-materialistic approach, and I understand this is not enough reflected. Today, however, human attention to the issue of happiness, well-being, and spirituality has emerged a necessity that must inevitably be considered in urban development indicators. Based on my experience, as I mentioned before, we created a structure for CPI for metropolitan cities here. City prosperity have 72 indicators, and based on that, we try to measure, in general, urbanism. On the other hand, here in Toronto, we have ISO 37120. This is the kind of first ISO of urbanism, led by Professor Patricia McCartney here in University of Toronto in City Institute. And they try to evaluate cities and urbanism based on 100 indicators. The problem for both and also other global urban indicators is to come up with indicators that they cannot evaluate happiness in the urban lifestyle. How does question of happiness, which is a general important and hidden quality, fit into these indicators? Now, spirituality is a step further and is a matter that addresses human settlement and habitat and how it's raised as a dialogue. ACSF deserves thanks for this attention and raise such a great focus. I believe we need to try to create kind of international dialogue based on interaction with the international agency, United Nations, and try to extend this dialogue to the conversation between the government, city leaders in a global scale.
Thank you so much, Reza. It's really wonderful to hear you make these observations, because you've been working a very long time. And I'm very happy to hear that the criteria that had been very much at the base of UN Habitat, CPI, et cetera, were really more quantitative. And now we're moving toward a greater need for qualitative aspects. And you're identifying the spiritual need as a very important aspect. We certainly agree with you. Well, I'd like to now go to our last speaker on this topic, Nasreen. Would you be kind enough to address these questions?
Thank you, Julio. If you could just give me 1 minute before I ask. Yeah, this is perfect. The explicit and the implicit. No, yeah, that's perfect. If you could just leave it on that for a second. Let me just come to this first question of the sort of putting into context the declaration and pick up perhaps where Anna left off by talking about the Athens Charter. And let me just remind everybody of something that was said by Adolfo Natalini in 1971 as one of the members of Super Studio. If design is merely an inducement to consume, then we must reject design. If architecture is merely the codifying of bourgeois model of ownership and society, then we must reject architecture. If architecture and town planning is merely the formalization of present unjust social divisions, then we must reject town planning and its cities. Until all design activities are aimed towards meeting primary needs, until then, design must disappear. We can live without architecture. Let me also remind all of us what Adolfo Natalini went on doing as architecture and urban planning. So I think that unfortunately we are in a sort of a context whereby manifestos and declarations are extremely important in the existence of a corpus, a theoretical, but also a sort of a basis, a foundation for architecture to move on. On the other hand, we do know that manifestos and declarations usually in their best turn out to be a movement, and that is metabolism, what happened to the metabolists and their movement. But I would like to here oppose or also or maybe disagree with my dear friend Sam Tehranchi and say that there are no place for movements anymore in the society that we live. And maybe we can discuss this later on. So I think that I am from a culture where I feel that the implicit is a philosophy that one works with. And that's perhaps where I can feel somewhere the capacity and the possibility of transcendence or transcendental architecture as a way of getting away and finally putting a cross over not the Athens Charter, but what and where modernism has brought us to be. And I don't criticize modernism. This is an image of the implicit, the round city of Baghdad, as a total utopian vision of how human beings and human intelligence can deal with not only centrality, but the capacity of power and the egalitarian possibility of a utopia which would allow for mankind to live hand in hand. On the other hand, we know that the explicit is the form, and the form actually is the round city of Apple, which is the 21st century. And it shows us that perhaps we can come back to what Natalini was saying in 1971, that until form of architecture is the response to consumerism, but also the bourgeois life and also the inequalities that it creates, perhaps we can forget it and leave it for Apple. And perhaps sometimes we can also, well, we're all on apples anyway, and that is the problem of our society today. And therefore, it makes it very, very difficult for architecture to have a conscience. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the implicit also is, again, is this part of my culture, which is, and some of us, of course, not all, but some of us that see this sort of, this capacity of a territory to disappear, disappearance as a way of allowing for the action of architecture to happen. This is a cemetery, but these are two images of cemeteries, but one, both of them actually in the Eastern cultures, one in Hong Kong and the other one, but then it's in Hong Kong in an Eastern culture, but it is in Hong Kong, the sort of the Christian cemetery, as opposed to the Takht-e Foulad in Isfahan, which is a Muslim cemetery. Now this capacity of disappearance is something that perhaps one needs to work with in this question of transcendence, as opposed to the explicit, which in itself has the possibility and the capacity of formalization to happen in such a way that it doesn't divide, but it actually allows for the standing of architecture to happen. Could we go to the next slide? And it's the last one.
Because
yes.
We're now running a little late. So
That's
please
it.
conclude as soon as possible. Thank you.
That's it. That's the last slide. And what I'm suggesting in terms of the second question, I'm suggesting that actually the transcendental architecture needs to perhaps create a culture of construct, a culture to respond to how to do things, as opposed to the fact that we have to do things. There needs to be a manual, there needs to be a construction manual, there needs to be a drawing manual in order for any manifesto to see the day. Thank you.
Fantastic. Will you help us toward that? Now, we've moved very, very smoothly, a couple of minutes behind schedule, onto part 2, your panel discussion. And so it's now really about 12:25. And I'd like to do this in about 20 minutes. So I open the panel to you yourselves. Who would like to begin this discussion? Tammy, would you kindly help us with this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful feedback and insight. It's been an absolute pleasure to work on this with my colleagues and to listen to your responses. And kind of picking up from the last set of comments by Nasreen, thank you so much for those, because we had earlier had a conversation about bringing in non-Western ideas and examples of manifestos, and Nasreen has kindly elaborated on that, and maybe share a few more words about the examples that she quickly shared at the end. But my question isn't so much about that, but my question is, again, going back to a couple of terms that were used of explicit and implicit. And if we want so maybe the question is, where would it be most beneficial to have the manifesto dwell? You know, in the explicit, in the implicit, somewhere in between. My concern is that if we start to become very literal by providing a construction manual, that we become far too explicit and kind of make ourselves not completely relevant everywhere, because how can you make construction manual for every place in the world, right? So again, it's up for debate, and I'd like to kind of open it up for feedback on that. Thank you.
Yes, would you raise your hands so that I can help see who wishes to speak next? Yes, anyone. Be brave. Yes, that brave lady from Hong Kong, via France.
She wants to go to sleep. She wants to go to sleep. That's why, Tammy. I would like to just expand a little bit on the explicit and implicit in terms of the manual. I think that it's of course, from my side, it is a complete provocation. It's a complete provocation, but I also mean that the manuals that have been there, that's why I put the two. I put the sort of the construction manual in a miniature, in a Persian miniature, and also the construction manual of Ying Xiao Fa Shi that I talked about earlier on in other conversations, which are of two parts of the world. Now, these do not give in any way or manner a generic or a universal construction manual. And we do know that if one wants to take the sort of the pointers of the declaration seriously, then one needs to almost create a sort of a dynamic manual which would fit into the localities. And the manual today would need to work with the localities in such a way that the local becomes the most important thing. And that's why the Apple Round City would in no way have any kind of place in our discussion. And therefore, that's where one could begin to even think of what could be not a universal manual, but in fact, local manuals which would come together as an encyclopedia almost.
Wow, there you go. We have our work cut out for us. Who wishes to address this subject next? I see Roberto over there, and I see Merdad and Anna and Tom. Tom, you're our chairman. What do you say about all this? And Julio, who wants to go next? Julio, go ahead, please.
I think the topic that Nasreen brought, can we, and Sam also, can we in the 21st century have a manifesto? Are we past the kind of modernistic or pre-modern ideals that one thing will lead everybody? You know, it's kind of a naivete, if you wish, to put a declaration like this forward, and yet. And that's the team has this conversation from the beginning. And yet, as we face the world that we all have seen some images today, ethically, philosophically, spiritually, what else is there to do but try to do something about this, right? So there is this kind of internal, if you wish, contradiction or naivete built into this declaration. I would call it voluntary innocence. In which we know that probably is a little bit too much to ask for this movement, and yet at the same time there's some sort of, I don't call it desperation, but a tremendous urgency to address the matter before us, to be at peace, at least that we did our part in this struggle that we are facing in 21st century, in every country, in every city, in every community. So I just want to say that because I mean I want to make sure that the audience know that we have struggled through these super narratives that of course postmodernity and post-structuralism have proven corrupt, but yet what else there to do? And then the second dimension is the strategic dimension, which I think begins to be unfolded by the question that Tammy and the answer of Nasreen, how strategically we could have this larger I don't call it narrative, a larger vision of how to move forward, and then be able to do something about it. And that's why also we struggled tremendously as a group in those 6 criteria. We frankly fought through every inch, and that's what we need your feedback on these. So I just wanted to raise those 2 issues. Thank you.
Tom had his hand up next. Please, Tom, and then Reza, and then Nasreen.
Yeah. No, I was just going like this.
No, I want to do Tom, and then Reza, and then, oh, you were scratching your hair.
That's right.
Beautiful gray hair. I wish I had some. Tom, there's some hair. Go.
I'll just inject into this, you know, in terms of the explicit and the implicit. Of course, they're in terms of sustainable, not only environmentally sustainable, but also, I think often positioned as emotionally supportive. There are frameworks out there, and I just wonder if they can inform the process. There's a living building challenge, and then perhaps closer to our discussions, there's the well building standard. So I just want to, suggest that those might be looked at in terms of providing a context.
Thank you. Reza, would you like to contribute?
Yeah, I believe I believe that is kind of conversation related to the identity, and of course we can create kind of general discussion globally, and then each local identity can create their own structure and own interaction with this subject. And this is, I believe, fundamental for my perspective. And the other things is, I'm thinking how we are able to create this this dialogue in the global scale that is so important. And I think because it's behind of this conversation is a kind of hidden war between the capitalism, a materialistic approach to the urbanism, and non-materialistic approach to the urbanism. We need to create kind of interdisciplinary discussion. Maybe later you can organize some things with other discipline, philosophy, I don't know, and through the social media try to create kind of interaction with the society in the global scale. I believe they encourage, they participate, and it's kind of demand. Even through the situation of COVID-19, people need to rethink about different lifestyle. It's completely related to the lifestyle, and we should to change. And this is a entry point for starting this transformation.
Well, this is the beginning, I think, of these, and certainly is something to work on. I had, well, let's see, since Sam hasn't spoken and someone had actually raised his name and had sort of thought that maybe his suggestion needed amplification. Nasreen, would you let me have Sam speak next? Go ahead, Sam.
First, I want to apologize for the interruption that I had for technical difficulties. But going back to what Nasreen opposed about me pointing out having a movement, it really depends on how we define the meaning of a movement at the 21st century. I would say that to make this happen, to make this ideal architecture, idealistic architecture happen, which I think is quite essential, and we have come to the point which is like saving the world's climate. It's the same thing as saving architecture. I think, and we will become to that point more and even deeper in a few years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. So we need to be ready. But for actually making this happen, I think we should think outside of architecture. I think we should think about new methods or a new meaning of movement when we talk about this. I like to point out some startups which happened in the 21st century. For architecture, we have not yet seen any startup ideas. Imagine Uber, maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this would have been impossible for us to thought that this kind of mobility actually can happen. But it happened, and now it's something essential. If you don't have this app or this ability in your life, any day you would face some difficulties. We would face, and also the things that this pandemic has brought to our society, like working from distance and not being present as a physical at your workplace as a physical thing. So I think when I say movement, I actually mean something which is essential, and the society would like to have it and would like to use it, and without it, it would somehow feel the lack of something that brings quality to its life. We need ideas, bright ideas. I mean, the manifesto is great, but to implement it, we need ideas, we need innovation, and we need to know how to motivate people, how to start, and how to motivate people to come to their senses, to come to their conscious, and to feel the quality that they have been missing so far. I would say even a child can recognize that when there's a nice light coming down from window, and it's a controlled light and it's a beautiful light, it gets a good feeling to itself. It's like what you asked us to do, Nader, when we wanted to start this conversation. You said to meditate for 30 seconds, and I can tell you that that really matters. So this is my whole idea about movement. I mean, it should be a part of our life. It's not something that we dictate to others, like metabolists, which Nasrin pointed out, which I think it was quite exaggerating kind of movement, but rather something which is in our veins, something which becomes a necessity of our everyday life. So when I say movement, I mean that kind of thing happening in our life.
Thank you, Sam. I felt as you began, when you said we sort of need something new, like a Uber as a new vehicle. You think we need a new tool. We need a new vehicle to move this forward. That's a wonderful idea, and I think maybe some conversation on that. I haven't heard from Roberto, Anna, Mehrdad. Yes, Roberto, would you go next?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, our declaration, I see our declaration as being aspirational, as being somewhat of a call to action, you know, acknowledging that we're all in trouble and we need to step up and, you know, from whatever disciplines we come from, really address these bigger challenges. So I want to acknowledge, first of all, that Ahmad has identified there are 2,000 attendees to this webinar right now.
Isn't that wonderful?
It's extraordinary. And so I would like to put out to the 2,000 attendees, how can you in your own lives, in your own disciplines, whether you're a practitioner or an academic or whatever, how do you think you can take this declaration as a starting point, as a call to action to kind of begin to, you know, participate in what my own mentor would call the great work of, you know, reestablishing, you know, a right relationship, you know, with the natural world that Anna refers to, or, you know, for planetary ecosystem, as it were.
Beautiful. Anna, go ahead. Anna, unmute.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, just to build on that, I think I agree also with going outside the disciplines and also looking more in the margins, I think is very important. And I do feel, as I mentioned before, and thank you for mentioning it, Roberto, is that the transcendence for me is as much as also going back to this contact with nature. I think it's really very much very linked. I think the transcendence and this real reintegration of our relationship with nature and all living beings is also important. And so for me, that's why the wordings, I would say, maybe just to be a little bit provocative, is saying, you know, should we just put human habitats, for example, or should we have habitats? Because in fact, what we want to create is a system. We know we're losing so much biodiversity because we are developing and building. So don't we want to sort of create habitats for all species in a way? When we build an architecture, we want to create, and I also think about regenerating. I think for me, I use that concept a lot, and I'm wondering, you know, it's not, we always have to see how can we actually regenerate a place where we're intervening in and bring in more species or bring back ecology or repair. I think a lot of our work is not just building and continuing to build, but really repairing a lot. So I'm just wondering how that can be brought in, and maybe it's also, everybody has their own vocabulary. So I thought, as you were saying to the 2,000 people watching, it could also be interesting to see how different communities or different cultures would take this manifesto declaration and use their own vocabularies or their own words and their own ideas. That would, I think, also be interesting. For example, instead of eco-technology, I would maybe use nature-based solutions, for example. I mean, and I'm not saying one is wrong or the other. And also this idea of environmental adaptation. I would really put regeneration, for me, is really important, not just adapting, but actually regenerating. The idea that we have to even give back more. We can't just be content with the net zero or adapting, etc., but we really have to give back much more, as much as we can. So yeah, I'll finish up there.
Wonderful. Mehrdad, would you make a contribution?
Yeah, I want to see that from maybe another view, or maybe some friends mentioned that when we see the history of such manifestos, and when we see the process of these manifestos in the history and how they bring to actual practice and how they bring to actual world and building, we also see some practitioners. We also can see some built environment from those manifestos. And for this manifesto, great manifesto, then your recognition of the ineffable potential of spiritual dimension and transformation of the built environment, and emphasis on attention to fundamental principles of existence is of high value. This prior attention to higher values over mundane reflection of unconsciousness in our world is the signifier of the turning point. I think it's really, really turning point in architecture discipline. And I want to say, if we want to have process and progress in our manifesto, I want to mention again that departure, that subdivision, or that section in the structure of ACSF, who focus on strategies and design, and can have consultants to other organizations or clients.
Mehrdad, I apologize for interrupting. We have just another minute left here for this portion. I'm going to ask our dear host Ahmad to talk about this, but I would ask Ahmad if let us first do the questions and answers for 10 minutes, and then as you close our webinar, please comment on what you've heard and how you think we could take it forward. Would that be agreeable to you, Ahmad? Yes? Thank you, dear. So I want to now go to the question and answer period. We have some questions that have come in, and I'm going to ask Roberto if he would kindly, we only have 10 minutes to read the question and answer. It will easily fill it quickly with 2 or 3 questions. So Roberto, maybe you might begin the first question that you want to read so that our audience can hear and our panelists could think about what you would like to say, or maybe somebody could contribute to that. Roberto?
Excellent. Thank you, Nader. I think this is a question from Dr. Manoucher Tabibian, who is an emeritus professor of urban and regional planning at the University of Tehran. And I think this is a good question because it really ties very nicely into the entire conversation we've been having. He asks, how can one declaration apply to so many diverse global cultures, ecologies, and socioeconomic conditions? So first of all, I'd like to thank them for this very, very challenging question. And by way of attempting to answer it, I would like to begin by saying that the crises outlined in the Declaration's preamble, such as global warming, climate change, and equitable access to resources, social unrest, erosion of liberal democracy, threats to peace, and migratory pressures are all universal insofar as they affect the entire human population, and in fact, the entire Earth population of human and non-human life, regardless of one's geographical location, faith tradition, socioeconomic reality, or cultural context. Clearly, some jurisdictions are facing these challenges more acutely than others, but we have seen of late that these issues have made world news, even in privileged jurisdictions like the US. We believe that to effectively solve these challenges, what is required is nothing less than a transformational shift in worldview, which acknowledges that the universe has from its very beginning both a psychic, spiritual dimension in addition to its physical material dimension. For peoples of all faiths, this might mean that the earth represents a sacred reality, which requires the human community to be in right relationship with it. By this, we mean a more mutually enhancing human-earth relationship, as opposed to the current pervasive worldview, which can be described perhaps more accurately as a dominant exploitive relationship. It seems folly to me to assume that we can have a physically, emotionally, and spiritually healthy human community on an unhealthy planet, yet we continue to behave in ways that undermine the very Earth's life-supporting systems. Because the human population is increasingly moving towards urban environments to satisfy their basic habitat needs, we believe that acknowledging spiritual and emotional well-being to assist in addressing these global challenges is paramount to achieving a viable human presence within the built environment. Our research indicates that current documents such as the UN Habitat, UN Sustainable Development Goals, and even the Earth Charter do not explicitly address the dimension of spirituality. And this is where we believe our declaration can add an important new voice to the discourse in which we all need to engage.
Wonderful. Have we received another question? Roberto, you need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I have not seen anything explicit in the chat as yet, so.
Okay, I just want to say, this is, as you know, live, and it's the first such webinar we're doing all together. We will look forward, and I know Ahmad is receiving questions in perhaps different languages. We're going to ask that these all be recorded and that we will then find some way, I hope through Ahmad's good graces, to then disseminate our responses to your questions. So we want this to be very much an aspect of an ongoing. We've asked your participation, and so I look forward to questions and suggestions that you all send in. So now, let's see. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. Does someone want to give a response to that first question that was asked by Tehran University professor and some of his colleagues? Anyone here? Oh, don't all raise your hands.
Okay.
Yes, Anna, quick.
Maybe my earlier suggestion is this idea that perhaps different communities can, take this type of declaration and then let's say maybe transform it. Let's say it's not such a rigid a declaration or manifesto, but then they can transform it with their own vocabularies, their own issues, their own questions. So then it could be a sort of an evolving manifesto that can adapt or to different context.
I want to just comment on that. It's a very interesting, dangerous thought. It's a wonderful thought. And we actually asked Ahmad, and then I asked also our Tehran University colleagues, if they would translate the English version of the declaration into Persian, into Farsi, which has been done. And we will also distribute that translation at some point soon so that you have it. Dangerous is that too many cooks can spoil the broth. I want to say something to you. There is such a discipline that is needed in research, and that discipline needs the meeting of minds. And then you can have another group with another meeting of minds. And then this dialogue that Reza has suggested is one way to begin this. I don't believe in, a million stars creating one workable document. We began this as an offering, as a search. So obviously the search goes on. And I believe to hear your reactions, hear your comments, that would help us. As a research group, we really welcome it. But then we would put out this for another dialogue at some point to be organized. So I don't necessarily believe in the total communal research. It could get too diluted by personalities and other things. We've tried to keep this in many ways at a certain very high level, and at least from what we were able to achieve. So now it's 12:53, and I'd like to actually ask, if no one else has a comment, I'd like to actually, Nasrin, yes, here, may I ask, because I really want to leave enough time for Ahmad to make his contribution as well. So make your contribution, but if you could in just a minute or so, please.
Less than a minute, perhaps. Just coming back to what Anna was saying and what you were saying yourself. I think it's not, I totally agree with you that a manifesto cannot become something which is global and everybody starts putting something into it. However, I think that there could be an interesting moment that one says that the manifesto is concerned with a series of global issues which concern everyone, everywhere. However, there are local concerns that are very different from those global issues, but touch upon those global issues. Therefore, if there is an expansion of architects that are interested in, and also other, it's not only architects, but other disciplines that are interested to take part in this, that perhaps it has to be a sort of another document, which then becomes very localized, as opposed to the document which is in fact the manifesto and the declaration itself.
The architect and organizer, as usual, making wonderful contributions, and that's the way to go, I'm sure. Ahmad, dear, I'd like to invite you to please comment on the panel discussion, these questions, and close out our webinar. And I want to thank, before I leave then the screen, to thank everyone for your participation, the speakers on the screen now. I understand the 2,000 people who have been on listening to us. We thank you for your patience. Ahmad, dear, would you take over?
Yes. Thank you, all of you, for your professional comments. Hope you remember, Nader, about second issue of 2A magazine, which is published with the theme of architecture, culture, and spirituality. Now, at the meeting, I remembered a paragraph of the editorial, which is provided before and published on that edition, that maybe I think this is a deep inspiration from my side, because I always use of this text in my work and in my different editorials for the different themes of the 2A magazine. So this is the page of the editorial board of 2A magazine with the edition of Architecture, Culture, Spirituality, which is published in 2011, and that was related to my discussion with one of my close friends in Dubai. This is the paragraph that I wanted to share with you now. When we come across to architectural masterpieces, we deeply feel that the creator of the design must have been in a deep meditative state while designing the structure. There is something more than mathematical calculations and symmetrical proportion. It is as if invisible. Sorry, my glass doesn't work. There is something more than mathematical calculation and synthetic. It is as if the invisible hand of divine forces were present and had inspired the creator directly. When one simply look at such buildings, his state of being changes immediately. One feels that has entered into a timeless zone of reality. His mind stops analyzing and thinking and becomes meditative and peaceful in a way his soul vibration harmonizes and attunes with the designer's inner vibrations when he designed the structure. This is the point that I wanted to share. And also, I wanted to indicate another that we can extend about 10 minutes if it needs. So let me know.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What did you say?
So it would be possible to extend time about 10 minutes if it needs.
10 minutes?
Yes.
Wonderful. May I ask you, dear, have you then completed your contribution? Would you like to open it to our speakers? And also, have we received any question online that Roberto could read and respond? Ahmad, any questions that have been received?
I only received one message and sent to Roberto. That was the only message.
Do you have it, Roberto? Or unmute.
Yes, sorry, I understood to be more of a comment than a question, and I'll read it. It's from Steve Paget, and it says, "Thank you all for this most needed relief from our conditions of disease." And by this, I presume he means our situation worldwide of the pandemic. "I am reminded of essential things obscured." So again, I presume what Steve means is that the other urgencies surrounding the pandemic have distracted us from these other very important issues that the Declaration is trying to address.
All right. Yes. All right. If there is not at this time, yes, question, Ahmad?
I want to share more comments with Roberto now.
All right. Thank you for your patience while that's happening. Roberto, you just signal us when you receive the question.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe as we wait, I can say something about what Mehrdad said at the beginning about the three principles, contemplation, compassion, and moderation. And appreciated that, Mehrdad, really you saw that that's really at the core of this practice. And also that has to do some of the comment that Anna brought about, this idea that it's not sufficient to not disturb nature. We should do a lot more than that. And once we enter in that state of compassion and contemplation and moderation, there is nothing else to do but really enter in this profound relationship with what is, and the sacred extends beyond just humanity into all creation. So that state, which I think Ahmad also suggested as the designer enters as they produce these beautiful buildings, is part of this manifesto.
Thank you, Roberto.
Okay. Sorry, Nader, there are two more questions.
All right.
And I would like to direct one to Julio. This is from Fatima, because Julio's been doing a lot of research in this particular regard. She asks, how can transcending experience in architecture help human life? Have you ever had such experience, and did it change your life, and how?
Excellent. Julio.
But I've been working in this for a long time. Yes, when you have the kind of experience that you are asking, these extraordinary architecture experiences, really there is a mystical access to something larger than you are, and the self is put in the right place. And this condition of seeing or feeling or intuiting the large unity invariably produces a breakthrough in the way in our consciousness, and that allows a very different relationship with just yourself, but more importantly with others. So architecture becomes then a gateway to really a more enlightened way of being, and that's what all sacred spaces, if you wish, no matter what faith they belong to, attempt to do. But as we show in those examples at the beginning, this need not be pursued just by sacred buildings, but also in ordinary buildings, appropriately designed. We show from a bathhouse to a science center could be attained.
Thank you, Julio.
Yes.
Another question, Roberto?
Yes, there's one more, and this is from Dr. Brian Sinclair. And I would like to direct this to be answered by any of the professors in our group. To what extent should or could the manifesto find its way into architectural education? This seems to be present to present a potent and future-looking approach to catalyze longer-term change. Arguably, environmental design education falls short in embracing and understanding ethics, human behavior, political acumen, cultural sensitivity, etc.
Who would like to take that on? Tom, you've been dealing with this quite a bit. Would you respond to that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that question, Brian. It's nice to hear from you. And I think what at the essence of Brian's question, and also I think at the essence of the declaration is as Roberto has underlined, is the including or incorporating spiritual perspectives into the work. And we've recognized, as have many, that schools of architecture as professional organization not only have tended to not recognize those perspectives, but in some ways or in many ways have denied them or suppressed them. And so we certainly would hope that these kind of conversations could take place in schools of architecture. And I'll just add, when it comes to spirituality, there's a lot of definitions of it, but it is, it's drawing from the wisdom traditions of the world, and so and that just doesn't mean the what we call the organized religions. And at the core of religion and spirituality, at least in part, is ethics. And in other words, actions, perspectives, actions, and positions that aim for the greatest good for the greatest number. Once you set up that kind of framework, you don't have to come into design studio and say, okay, so we're going to talk about spirituality in your work. It's more of an orthopraxy at this point, where we see how we can apply these types of positions in the work. And in my own work, it works both ways, that with students you are actually modeling spiritual behavior through your actions, through how you frame the problems, through how you listen with an open heart. without, without having to underline it or do it in bold?
I think we're pretty near the conclusion of our even extended 10 minutes. And actually, if I could, in these last just few minutes, I want to respond to Fatima's question that was, have you experienced this yourself? Or is this something that you can tell us a story about this? I'd like to go back to 1970. We held the first International Congress of Architects in Isfahan. At that time, we had the great pleasure of having invited, and he accepted to come, of Louis Kahn, the great, I would think, 20th century metaphysical architect of the world, particularly of America, in the traditions of Sullivan and Wright and others. So it was a great pleasure to take Louis Kahn with just one or two other of the participants, students like myself, and we walked into the Friday Mosque of Isfahan. And as we wandered through this field, particularly in the chamber of 360 plus brick domes, Lou began to experience such a evocative personal sense of elation that has been more or less described as a transcendent experience. And I looked at Lou, literally, Lou Kahn, this great, great architect of the 20th century, was shaking intolerably, gently. And I said, Lou, and I looked at him and I saw that tears were coming from his eyes. I said, Lou, are you all right? What is it? He said, Nadir, I have always dreamt that I would be in a space such as this, where one material would be roof, wall, and floor, illuminated in a transcendent light. So there you have one of the great metaphysical architects of the world, who's built buildings that we can go and walk through, and whom we admire, who was a personal testimonial to the idea of transcendent architecture. And so I'd like to end our wonderful webinar and thank everyone with that story, and hope that we all, each of you who are looking and listening, will create an architecture that would give that feeling to another person that you love and that you know.
Amen.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you all. Keep in touch.
Definitely. Thank you, Ahmad.
Thank you, Ahmad.
Bye-bye. So we're signing off. Remember us